Are we live? Good for being live. Right. Now what we got to do is go and find some documents to show you that the UK is breaking its own law. The exact same law that it uses to keep murderers and pedophiles in the country. So let's go have a look. European Court of Human Rights Convention. And then we how comes it's so easy to find on your phone but never on a computer when you want to find it? There we go. And let's put that on a separate window so nobody gets confused. And then let's see if we can bring it up. That'll be the one. Done. Right. I scooch myself over there. And then put this somewhere. Enlarge it slightly so everybody can see. Can everybody see? That'll have to be the best I can do. Right, currently in the UK we don't have a written constitution, which is a bunch of bollocks anyway. But let's go through this and let's demonstrate where the UK is breaking its own law. Blah, 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 blah. Contents. Minimize that ever so slightly. Right, the government signatory here to being members of the Council of Europe. Europe, not of the EU. Considering the Universal Declaration of Human Rights proclaimed by the General Assembly of the United Nations, on the 10th of December 1948, meaning it applies to every country that's in the continent of Europe. Continent of Europe. Not a member of the EU, continent of Europe. Blah, 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 blah. Being resolved as a government. Article 1. The High Contract Parties shall secure to everyone within their jurisdiction the rights and freedoms defined in Section 1 of this Convention. So this is Section 1. Right to life. Everyone's right to life should be protected by law. No one should be deprived of life intentionally, save in the execution of a sentence of court following the conviction for a crime which this penalty is provided by law. That basically means that you can be born and live. So, technically, right to an abortion is not under European Court of Human Rights Convention. And as it applies to the UK, considering we don't have a constitution of our own and we are under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Human Rights, as is proven by the fact that you can't deport people under these provisions. Blah, 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 blah. Article 3. Prohibition of torture. Is a mask for coronavirus a type of torture? I would say yes. Why? Because effectively it's a gag, and you're not allowed to use a gag in law for the punishment of anything unless you're spitting on people, basically. So the UK government at the moment mandating masks is in contravention of prohibition of torture under Article 3 of the European Court of Human Rights Convention on Human Rights. What do we have to say about that matter? There is a Belgian lawsuit, yes, and let's hope it pays off, because that would be a good thing. Because even though we're not in the European Union, if we're subject to the European Court of Human Rights Convention on Human Rights, as being a country in the continent of Europe and under the UN delegation of being a European country and not having a written constitution of our own, if that pays off and becomes law, it shall apply across Europe. which is what they're trying to do with their Digital Act as well. They're saying that if any one country contravenes any other country, it will go to a central governance to adjudicate on the law of any provision. So it applies universally. All right. Forced or compulsory labour, blah blah blah, that's about slavery. Right to liberty and security. Everyone has the right to liberty and security of a person. No one should be deprived of his liberty, save in the following cases in accordance with the procedure prescribed by law. Now, the UK current legislation on coronavirus is not law, it is legislation. Why? Because it's temporary and can be voted out at any time that a vote is called. If it was on statute, you'd have to put in a bill to reverse the law. And seeing as you don't have to apply a bill to get rid of the Corona Act, it's not law. We are, as far as everybody is aware, because the UK government doesn't have its own constitution, and if via a treaty, which is the new trade deal, supposedly, it's a treaty as governed by international law, if it applies to us, we're under the European Court of Human Rights, because that's what determines if any part of that treaty violates international law, as I understand it, under the law. So, lawful detention of a person after conviction by a competent court, which means that you can't be detained unless you are convicted, which means you can only be held for 24 hours anyway under investigation of breaking the law, and that's why you are let go and not fined, and you can overturn it. Because they can't bring a charge. You can't be charged for not wearing a mask or for being in a gathering, because it's not against the law. So, yes. Lawful arrest or detention of a person affected for the purpose of bringing him before the competent legal authority on any reasonable suspicion of committed an offence, or where it is reasonably considered necessary to prevent his committing an offence or fleeing having done so. But you haven't committed an offence, you will be let go after 24 hours. We've seen this with every arrest made for coronavirus law breaking, because you're not breaking the law. So they can't hold you for longer than 24 hours because they can't apply charge. Therefore, any charge they wish to bring to you or any fine they wish to give you is null and void. So don't do it. They're breaking their own law. Lawful detention of persons for the prevention of spreading infectious disease of persons of unsound mind, alcoholics or drug addicts or vagrants of an infectious disease. Have they proven it's infectious? No, because they haven't isolated it and they haven't proven human transmission. The WHO is supposed to be the governing body on these things. Blah, blah, blah. You'll have to give me the details of the case of Melanie Shaw and why she was being held and under what charge and when it was. Lawful arrest or detention of a person to prevent is effecting an unauthorised entry into the country, or of a person against whom action is being taken with a view to deportation or extradition. So there you go. You can be held and detained if you illegally enter a country and you are awaiting extradition, which means that you don't have any right to enter a country, be housed in a country, be fed in a country, be given any money by a country. So they're in violation of that as well. The layout of this needs to be adjusted so it fits on one page instead of having to go through this. Here is another one. Everyone who is arrested should be informed promptly in a language which he understands of the reason for his arrest and of any charge against him. So unless they can bring a specific charge, you're in violation of the Corona Act, which is not law, so it's not a charge. It's a statute, which means that it only applies to the government, which means that it restricts the government in what the government can do only unto itself and in Parliament. It doesn't apply to the people. Violation beyond violation. Exactly. This is what we're going through. Why the UK is breaking its own law. and why it's contravening your human rights under this document, which applies to the whole of Europe under the UN Charter as imposed in 1946, as it states at the top. Let's go right back to the top so we can read that. Back to the top. Blah, blah, blah. Convention. Considering the Universal Declaration of Human Rights proclaimed by the General Assembly of the United Nations on the 10th of December 1948. So there you go. We've already covered you have the right to life. You're not allowed to be tortured. A mask is torture. We were going through this, and under Article 5, right to liberty and security. Saying that you can detain illegal immigrants indefinitely as they're awaiting extradition or deportation. You have to be informed promptly in a language of which you can understand and in detail the nature and cause of the accusation. So they have to proclaim what law you are breaking, and they can't. You might have seen videos going around Twitter of people saying, where is it in the law? And they can't state where it is in the law because it's not in the law, therefore they can't charge you with it. No punishment without law. No one shall be held guilty of any criminal offence on account of any act or omission which did not constitute a criminal offence under national or international law at the time when it was committed, nor shall a heavier penalty be imposed than the one that was applicable at the time the criminal offence was committed. You have not committed a criminal offence by not wearing a mask or by gathering anywhere in any group of any size. And we shall find that through freedom of association later in this document. Okay, well, lucky that you've got someone to get anything for. So, be happy. Right. This article shall not prejudice the trial or punishment of any person for any act or omission which, at the time it was committed, was criminal according to the general principles of law recognised by civilised nations. And seeing as it's not law, it is statute. It is temporary statute, which does not require a bill to remove it, which means it is not in law. It means that they are violating that. Let's go on to Article 8. Right to respect for private and family life. Everyone has the right to respect for his private and family life, his home, and his home, which means that they can't stop you gathering in your home because you have the right to private and family life in your home. There should be no interference by a public authority with the exercise of your rights except in such accordance with the law. Corona Act is not the law, it is legislation by the government for the government, applying only to the government, which is why they didn't vote to take it out when they had the chance to take it out, because it contains provisions for the government to provide stuff to the country for whatever they're doing in prevention of corona. They stated that as a reason why they didn't vote it down. So there we go. Health or morals? Well, that needs to be taken out. There should be no interference by a public authority with the exercise right except such as in accordance with the law. Corona Act is not a law and is necessary in a democratic society in the interest of national security. There's no national security. Public safety. You're not contravening safety by doing something that you don't know that you're doing. You can't be arrested for it. Well-being of the country. The well-being of the country is its economic and social order. So if under the Corona Act they're stopping you from gathering, stopping you from engaging in private business, stopping you from ownership of anything, stopping you from buying anything or entering a store, that's in contravention of that. Who's going to set a case like Belgium but in the UK? Well, apparently there is a lawsuit going round that's supposed to challenge the Corona Act as being in violation of human rights. Whether or not they're actually going to bring it, when they're going to bring it. But apparently it's been drafted and it's supposed to be taken to whatever court it applies in. But they're not getting on with it, because obviously the courts are running at a snail's pace and won't hear anything that they don't want to hear. Article 9. Freedom of thought, conscience and religion. Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience and religion. So Article 10, freedom of expression. So under Article 9 and Article 10, you can't be blocked on Twitter for expressing an opinion, because the right to freedom of thought, and you have the right to freedom to express that thought, which means that anybody contravening on your right of thought and the right to express that thought is in contravention of the European Court for Human Rights, contravention on human rights. So there we go. It's right, includes freedom to change his religion or belief and freedom. So anybody wanting to kill anybody or saying that they will be under threat if they change their religion, that is illegal, which basically means that the Islamic provision under Sharia law of killing anybody who decides to announce that they're not a Muslim, that's in contravention of your human rights. Freedom to manifest one's religions or beliefs shall be subject only to such limitations as prescribed by law. So if there's not a law saying that you can't express a religious thingy-mabob, so as in not having to cover your face, health or morals, or for the protection of rights and freedoms of others. So there you go. Freedom to manifest one's religions or beliefs. So if it is your belief that a mask does not work, they can't contravene it, because it would contravene the protection of the rights and freedoms of others. We're going to keep going. Article 10, freedom of expression. Everyone has the right to freedom of expression. This right shall include the freedom to hold opinions, so you're allowed to hold an opinion, and to receive and impart information. So there you go. Any blocking by anyone on the internet of an expression of information or an opinion is in contravention, and therefore goes against, and therefore is breaking the law of the European Court of Human Rights. So you could sue Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google, anybody, if they delete you for expressing an idea. I can't access links that you post in the chat. It loads me back onto the back end page of YouTube and says that it can't go to the link. And where it shortens it, I can't highlight it and put it in the address bar and follow it that way either. So any links that you want me to see, bung them to me on Twitter, and I shall follow them there. Or if you're on Gab, join Gab, Mr. Squidge88 on Gab, for which you have added me anyway. Yes. Far more convenient to send links elsewhere, because clicking on them here doesn't follow them. It just randomly loads a different page. Blah blah. Without interference by public authority and regardless of frontiers. A frontier. Let's see what a frontier is defined as. Frontier as defined by ECHR. We know. Guide to the interpretation of Article 10. Are we under Article 10? Article 10, freedom of expression. Here we go. Introduction, blah, blah, blah. There you go. The Convention places initial and primary obligation on the contracting states to protect the rights that it guarantees. Article 1 states, the high contracting parties shall secure to everyone within their jurisdiction the rights and freedoms as defined in Section 1. So you can't be blocked on social media for anything that's not illegal. Gab can be too slow, yes, at certain points in the day. it does work some of the time, most of the time. Blah blah blah. Court points out the machinery. Right to freedom of expression protected in Article 10 of the European Convention is not an absolute right. The basic approach taken in Article 10 is to define freedom of expression very broadly, so as to include almost every form of expressed activity, and also to define very broadly what constitutes as an interference with the enjoyment of this right, thus casting an extremely wide prima facie net of protection. Certain inferences within this right are justifiable under Article 10, so that the contracting states may legitimately impose restrictions on the right, for example, to protect others' rights or overriding interests such as national security. Okay, so if you violate this, it has to be for the protection of other rights. You don't have the right to not be offended. You don't have the right to not be accused. You don't have the right to not have information spread about you unless it's private data such as your name, address and phone number. So there we go. Restricting you on any social media site for sharing anything that you want to, basically, that doesn't break the law to spread it, is in violation, as I read this. Blah blah, European Court first considered, first statement, large majority, handbook, general considerations, importance of the freedom of expression. Everyone has a right, so that is Article 10, and it says that you need a license to broadcast, to have television, or to own a cinema enterprise, but it doesn't say that you need a license to perform an action on any internet platform. So there we go. As noted above, courts consistently treat freedom of expression as a fundamental human right, emphasising to its importance not only directly but also as a core underpinning of democracy and other human rights. This is reflected in the quote above about freedom of expression being an essential foundation of a democratic society, which is also reflected in the following quotations, which the court has often repeated. More generally, freedom of political debate is at the very core of the concept of a democratic society which prevails through the convention. So discussing this cannot be intervened with or blocked or noted as something that can't happen. This is a political discussion, considering it's about law, and law is a direct descendant from the political body, therefore it's political discussion. There you go, subject to paragraph, sorry about the banner at the top, bloody PDF reader. Subject to paragraph 2 of Article 10, this paragraph, the exercise of these freedoms, since carries with it the duties and responsibilities, may be subject to such formalities, conditions, restriction or penalties as are prescribed by law, so unless it's prescribed by law, and are necessary in a democratic society in the interest of national security, territorial integrity or public safety. Can you tell me where I'm contravening public safety by expressing that the UK government is violating its own governing law by instituting torture and restrictions of freedoms of the right to life and property? For the prevention of disorder or crime, how is it disorderly? For the protection of health or morals, you can't prove that you're protecting anybody's health by telling them to wear a torture device or restricting gatherings, because obviously to enter any premises is to initiate a gathering of more than 2 people. So if Parliament is allowed to sit to discuss such things in a singular premises in a building, and they're allowed to gather in a group of more than 10 in that building, so are you. So they'd be breaking their own law by restricting you or initiating a fine for you gathering in any number in any space, if it's private property. So you're allowed to have as many people as you want in your own house. They can't instruct you. They can say, oh, it's general advice, don't have this many people in this enclosed space, but it is not a law. They cannot prevent you from doing it. blah, blah. There you go. We'll move on to Article 11 in a second. Scope of the right. Blah, 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 blah. In its view, to make someone retract his or her own opinion by acknowledging his or her own wrongness is a doubtful form of redress and does not appear to be necessary. So therefore, Twitter saying that you need to delete a post to regain access to the freely available platform by which you are not restricted under any law of any country. It's only determined by their terms of service, which is an undue restriction on your rights. Therefore, they're violating your rights by initiating their own term of service because they're contravening the law to be able to do it. So I express it. If I knew how to bring this up in a court of law without having to pay lots for a legal defence, I would do so. Article 11. Freedom of assembly and association. Everyone has the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and the freedom of association with others, including the right to form and join trade unions for the protection of his interests. So there you go. You're allowed to gather in any group that you wish, as long as you remain peaceful, which means that you are not causing destruction to a person or property. So they can't do that. No restriction shall be placed on the exercise of these rights other than such as prescribed by law. Corona Act is not law, and it's not written in it any restriction size, which is why they keep changing it and why they keep telling you that they're changing it, because it's not prescribed in law, which means that they're just announcing it, which means that it's not law. So they can't put that in place. They can't give you a fine or send the police round or restrict anything. You have not broken the law by gathering in any number in any premises, anywhere, outside, inside, up your own arse, it doesn't matter. And are necessary in a democratic society in the interest of national security or public safety. They haven't defined that whatever they're doing is keeping you safe, because they can't prove that without it you'd be any less safe. They have to prove in a court of law with evidence that gatherings actually spread a disease and therefore it is infectious, and they haven't proven that, and they won't prove that, and they can't prove that. Or for the protection of the rights and freedoms of others. So you can't contravene it unless it's for the protection of a right. And if you're violating a right by instituting it, it's not for the protection of a right, therefore you're contravening it. And you're contravening the freedom of others by imposing restrictions on the freedom of assembly. So it's an oxymoron, and they can't do it, and it's illegal. This article should not prevent the imposition of lawful restrictions on the exercise of the rights by members of the armed forces, of the police, or for the administration of the state. Rights of members of the armed forces shall not prevent the imposition of lawful restrictions on the armed forces. So you can restrict the armed forces, the police, and the administration of the state, but they're not. Therefore, they're providing the freedom to one and not the other. Therefore, they're violating your freedom while granting themselves a freedom, which is in contravention of it. No degradation from Article 2 except in respect of deaths resulting from lawful acts of war. There you go. Or Articles 3 and 4, paragraph 1 and 7 shall be made under this provision. Have they actually declared war on the people by trying to put this into place? I'm gathering what you tweeted me was about Belgium. I've seen tweets about the Belgium case. I haven't looked into it. But prohibition of abuse of rights. There we go. We'll get onto that. Right to marry. Right to an effective remedy, which means that you can prosecute them in a court of law for contravention of your human rights. Prohibition of discrimination. There you go. The enjoyment of rights and freedoms set forth in this convention shall be secured without discrimination on any grounds such as sex, race, colour, language, religion, political or other opinion. There you go. Directly in the European Court of Human Rights, Convention on Human Rights, you're not allowed to be discriminated against for political or other opinion, national or social origin, association with a national minority, property, birth, or status. So there you go. Therefore, social media sites blocking you in the continent of Europe for the expression of political or other opinion is illegal. Someone bring that in a court of law, please. Article 16. Restrictions of the activity of aliens. Nothing in Article 10, 11 and 14 shall be regarded as preventing the high contracting parties from imposing restrictions on the political activity of aliens. Therefore, you can block the vote of illegal immigrants, and it's not illegal to do so under this. Been tweeting links. Right, let me open the other window so that it doesn't appear on the tubes. Oh. Right, where are we? Okay. Thank you very much for retweeting the link. To people. Thank you very much. Prohibition and abuse of rights. Nothing in this convention may be interpreted as implying for any state, group or person any right to engage in any activity or perform any act aimed at the destruction of any of the rights and freedoms set forth herein or at their limitation to a greater extent than is provided for in the convention. Ooh. Nothing in this convention may be interpreted as implying for any state, group, or any person any right to engage in any activity or perform any act aimed at the destruction of any of the rights and freedoms set forth. Therefore, arresting you, fining you, blocking you, removing you, deporting you, extraditing you for the expression of any right herein shall not apply, cannot be interpreted. Ta-da! They've broken the law. Article 18. The restrictions permitted under this convention to the said rights and freedoms shall not be applied for any purpose other than those for which they have been prescribed. That's a dodgy one. Restrictions permitted under this convention to said rights and freedoms, so any restriction of your rights and freedoms, shall not be applied, so shall not apply, for any purpose other than those for which they have been prescribed. So any restriction of your rights and freedoms under this article shall be for the purpose of which they are prescribed. So deleting you for a political opinion is in contravention of this, and if it is prescribed that they are doing it for this, they have placed a limit on the use and restriction of these rights. Therefore, they're in contravention of it, as I read it under the law. Establishment of a court, criteria for office, judges, plenary court, single judgments, registrations, competence, relinquishment of jurisdiction, interstate cases, individual applications. The court may receive applications from any person, non-governmental organisation or group of individuals claiming to be the victim of a violation by one of the high contracting parties of the rights set forth in the Convention and the Protocols hereto. High contributing parties undertake not to hinder in any way the effective exercise of this right. Therefore, if the people of Europe as a continent, wish to bring a case in the European Court of Human Rights to say that Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Google, Instagram, WhatsApp, blah blah blah, are blocking you for political expression, you can bring it. And if they want to bring a case saying that anything under the Corona Act is in violation of this, or any Corona legislation that they've put in place or mandate that's punishable by a fine or imprisonment, especially 10 years for coming back off a holiday saying that you've been somewhere that you haven't, or not wishing to declare where you've been. Ta-da, do it. Accessible criteria, striking out applications. There you go, striking out applications. This court may at any stage of the proceedings decide to strike an application out of its list of cases where the circumstances lead to the conclusion that an applicant does not intend to pursue his application. Why bring a case if you're not pursuing it? The matter has been resolved. It has not been resolved. That's why you're bringing a case in the first place. For any other reason established by the court, it is no longer justified to continue the examination of the application. That is dodgy. Can't just throw it out for any reason because it may not apply. Blah blah. Friendly settlements. So the rest of that doesn't really apply to what we're going on about. What is important? Let's go back and cover what is important right from the top. So, this applies to any country, members of the Council of Europe, but seeing as it's implemented by the UN and we are in Europe, we are on the Council of the European Court of Human Rights by joining in this document as it applies because we don't have our own constitution and we are under this. Article 1, they have to respect this. Article 2, right to life, which means that you're allowed to live. Article 3, prohibition of torture, which means that they can't make you wear a mask. That is torture. Blah blah. Right to liberty and security. Article 5, no one shall be deprived of his liberty save in the following cases in accordance with the procedure provided by law. Corona Act is not law. Therefore, the UK is breaking its own law by contravening human rights under this article. And so, under Article 7, no punishment without law. The Corona Act is not law, it is legislation. It only provides it to the government, which is why they keep changing the rules, because it's not law. Because if it was law and in statute, you couldn't change it without a bill to change it. And seeing as there is no bill proposed for the changing of restrictions in the Corona Act, and you can't modify the Corona Act because it's not law, that's why they keep coming out and saying that the things have changed and restrictions have changed, because it's not law. If it was law, they couldn't change the restrictions on the fly. Stands to reason. Not law. You cannot be punished if it is not a law. Please understand that. Right to respect for private and family life. So it contravenes that, because you don't have a private life if the police can barge into your property during a private gathering. Freedom of thought, conscience and religion. So you're allowed to express thought and conscious thought, and they can't restrict on it. You're allowed to manifest one's religion or beliefs, because it's not prescribed by law that they are restricted for anything. And by contravening on it, you are not protecting the rights and freedoms of others, you are inflicting a restriction upon them. So there we go. Freedom of expression. So they're blocking that. Because restricted by law and necessary, blah 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 blah. for the protection of health and morals. They have to prove that what they're inflicting is for the protection of health and morals. It is your moral duty to alert people that someone is contravening a right and therefore instituting a punishment without law, which is against the law. And protection of health, they have not proven that any measure they're putting in place is for the protection of your health. Because if it was for the protection of your health, it would apply universally everywhere, all over the world in a single instance, and no one can change it. The fact that people can go without it and get rid of it means that it's not instituted in law and agreed upon internationally as a protection of your health. Otherwise, it would apply universally everywhere all at the same time. The mere fact that different countries have different rules means it's not for the protection of your health. Logic. Freedom of assembly and association. So there you go, they're contravening on that because they're saying that you're not allowed to gather in a public space for the protection of health, even though they haven't said how it protects health, because they haven't proven anything that they claim, and it's not in law anyway. They haven't provided a law for it. Prohibition of discrimination. They're not allowed to discriminate for political or other opinion. And it's a political or other opinion that the measures that they put in place are not for the protection of your health. And they are in violation of this. So they can't block me from saying it. This cannot be blocked from YouTube. I cannot be placed under any restriction for announcing this to you. It's a political and other opinion upon the law. Degradation in time of emergency. Strictly required by the exigence of the situation. It's no longer an exigent situation because it's been about for a year. In the beginning, they were allowed to put restrictions in place for the protection of your health because nothing was known. Now that they know it, now it's proven that they know it, now that there is medication for what they say is going on, now that it's proven that the medication works for what is going on, now that they have mitigating measures to prevent what is going on, it is no longer an exigent circumstance, and therefore they cannot put in any law that contravenes this. It's not an exigent circumstance. It is no longer a public emergency. It is just something that is going on. Therefore, they have to release all of these measures now. They're in contravention of this. Restrictions on political activity of aliens. So you're allowed to block illegal immigration, and you're allowed to say that they can't vote, they don't have a say, they don't have any recourse under the law if they have entered illegally for how they're housed, how they're fed, how they're paid, what conditions they're kept under, because they're allowed to be detained. There you go. Prohibition of abuse of rights. Nothing in this convention may be interpreted as implying for any state, group or person a right to engage in any activity or perform any act aimed at the destruction of any rights and freedoms set forth herein, or at their limitation to a greater extent than is provided for. So, as we covered, degradation in time of emergency is no longer an emergency. There is no exigence of a situation. They are breaking international law by keeping anything in place. Therefore, they are creating a prohibition and an abuse of rights because they are doing things to a greater extent than is provided for. They've broken the law. They are breaking the law. And that is all the important bits of that. So I hope I've covered that thoroughly. The UK is breaking its own law by putting in place things that degrade your rights and are against your rights under the European Convention on Human Rights that we are under because we don't have our own constitution and we have to have a bill in law, it has to apply, because otherwise that's a contravention of human rights under international law as they stand under the UN. So we have to have a Charter of Human Rights in effect, and as we don't have a written one in the UK of our own, this one applies. And the UK is shitting all over it by doing what they're doing. Someone bring it in a court of law if they know how, please. Official document from the ECHR.coe.int documents, PDFs supplied by the Council of Europe, European Court of Human Rights, as we are under. And we know we're under it. Why? Because people use it to say that people cannot be deported, even if they are technically an alien. And this provides that they can be deported or extradited or held for deportation or extradition. So they're going against that anyway for not protecting other people's rights or freedoms. La la la. Right, let's get rid of that. Let's move me back over there. Let's discuss. Rule makers are always rule breakers. Well, that's the point. It's like they think that they can act without restriction, just willy-nilly, off the cuff, as and how they want, and they can't. Because if in doing it, they're breaking international law under the European Court of Human Rights, which we are under, as I've explained we're under. And they say that we're under because they use its provisions to protect people, supposedly. There we go, they're breaking their own law. And I want an MP to bring that up. So if anybody can forward this video to an MP and say, look at this video, look at this explanation. If you agree with it, read it out. Say that they have gone above and beyond the exigence of an emergency circumstance, and therefore they're contravening on rights and preventing freedoms under no explainable condition. They can't prove it in a court of law that the actions that they are taking are for the protection of health anymore, because we have protections of health in place, readily available, and they've already put in restrictions. So anything other than barriers, the plastic screens that you've seen in shops, that's about it. That's about all they can do. They can't mandate it under law. They haven't mandated it under law. The Corona Act is not law. They cannot make you do it. It is not law that you have to put in restrictions. And putting in restrictions is in direct violation of the law anyway. So, yes. Someone take that, run with it, put it in law. Needs to be done. Can we change things? Lord Sumption did, as far as I'm aware, and he was laughed at. Well, they can laugh as much as they want, but if anybody wants to actually write and provide evidence and supply a serious case to the European Court of Human Rights, then the UK can be slapped down and told to lift everything immediately, or be heavily fined or sanctioned. And I mean, it wouldn't exactly be any different to what they're doing now by giving the EU money and all the fiddly bits that they're trying to do on trade under the treaty anyway. And because we're under a treaty with the European Union, this law applies. The European Court of Human Rights applies as our basically constitution. Which is why, when I was challenging Tesco about a mask today, I said I was exempt under Rule 3 and 5 of the government guidelines, and them asking me if I had a mask was in direct violation of human rights anyway. It's like if they ask you once, you can tell them to go away. If they ask you twice, that's harassment. If they ask you 3 times, that's a threat. And if they ask you 4 times, that's a threat to life and you can defend yourself. That's how I see it. So I'd argue it in a court of law anyway. And if they try to physically remove you from any premises under not wearing a mask, that is assault. And you're allowed to defend yourself. So that's how I'd go around that, personally. But now we can be here for a relaxed chat. I will cut the first 45 minutes into a video and post it everywhere. And we shall see what we are doing at the moment. Is there anything you'd like me to explore or bring up or discuss? It's a Sunday. I've got all day. What shall we do? Anything you want to talk about that I haven't covered so far? Unrelated to this topic? Oh no, look at this young man chugging cola. Oh, he's terribly unhealthy. And it's like, one, I'm not that young. And two, yes, I know the limitations of sugar. Well, there is wearing a lanyard, but you shouldn't have to wear a lanyard. You shouldn't have to wear any notification. It's illegal under the European Court of Human Rights, as we've just seen, for them to even ask if you have a mask. It's implying that they want to inflict a torture upon you. It's a threat. I see it as a threat anyway. Someone saying, excuse me, do you have a mask? You're allowed to say no, and that should be the end of it. Any challenge further than that is harassment, assault, threat to life, implication of torture, restriction to what the government has deemed as an essential provision. Because that's another point. If they're saying that you can only shop in supermarkets, and then when you go into a supermarket they wish to restrict your access by threatening to assault you or remove you because they can't inflict torture upon you by making you wear something that goes against an expression of political or other opinion, they're in convention of it all. They are contravening on your human rights. So, yeah. I would argue it in a court of law, but I don't want to proceed pro se in a civil claim against the government. Because, you know, they'll shit all over it. Bring out their lawyers and they'll be like, oh, look at this person with no legal representation thinking that they know the law. They don't know the law. The courts know the law. Throw them out. So yes, a lanyard is one option. And you say, oh, if you're medically exempt, just tell me and I'll go away. And it's like, I shouldn't have to. It's illegal for you to ask if I have a mask on me. They're not allowed. It's in contravention of the European Court of Human Rights ruling. It's like, I may print it out. It's only a 2-page document that I posed. It's like the government exemption list. Everybody's exempt under Rule 3 and under point 3 and 5 on it. I'll bring it up because I can. Let's go here. I'll bring up the window to show you what I'm doing. So we go here and we go UK government mask exemptions. Face coverings, when to wear one, exemptions, blah blah blah. We go down. What is a face covering? When to wear one? Basically everywhere outside. Enforcement measures, they're not allowed to enforce anything. When do you not need to wear a face covering? So here we go. In settings where face coverings are required in England, there are some circumstances where people may not be able to wear a face covering. Please be mindful and respectful of such circumstances. Some people are less able to wear face coverings, and the reasons for this may not be visible to others. This includes, but is not limited to, which basically means that you can produce any reason for not wearing a mask. Children, people who cannot put one on due to a disability, where putting on, wearing or removing a face covering will cause you severe distress. Therefore, by putting it on, you're creating your own severe distress by inflicting torture upon yourself for something that cannot be proven as a protection of anybody's health. So everybody's exempt under Rule 3. If you're deaf or you have a carer that needs to be able to communicate, blah, 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 to avoid harm or injury, bacterial pneumonia, staphylococcus, tonsillitis, thrush, hypoxia, and hypercapnia can all be inflicted by wearing a mask, so to avoid harm or injury, don't wear a mask. Or the risk of harm or injury to yourself or others, if you're harassed and your life is threatened by someone wanting to inflict assault upon you for not wearing a mask. There you go. Including if it would negatively impact on your ability to exercise or participate in a strenuous activity. If you're walking and wearing a mask restricts your breathing, and you therefore get lightheaded, you get pins and needles, you get blurred vision, you may faint by restriction of oxygen while walking, can be counted as a strenuous activity if you're on any sort of incline whatsoever. There you go. Police officers or other emergency workers, given that this may interfere with their ability to serve the public. So a police officer doesn't have to wear a mask, but wears a mask, then says it's the law that you have to wear a mask even though you don't have to wear a mask. Therefore, it's interfering with their ability to serve the public by telling you that you need to wear a mask because it's restricting them from going away and dealing with any other crime that may be more pertinent. Blah, blah. If you need to be identified, so if you're buying any age-restricted product, if you're purchasing alcohol, or if you're purchasing cigarettes, or if you're driving a car and you're purchasing petrol for that vehicle, because you need to be old enough to drive the car. If you're entering any premises for which you need to be over 18. So if you're entering a pub, you don't have to wear one because you may have to be ID'd for it. If asked to do so by shop staff or relevant employees for identification, there you go, that's what I just asserted. If required to receive treatment or services, for example, when getting a facial. When getting a facial, they're saying that you're allowed to remove it if you go into a spa to get a... In order to take medication, what do they class as medication? I can say that oxygen's medication for the condition of not wanting to faint. There you go. If you're attending a faith school or having lessons in a place of worship as part of your core curriculum. If you're undertaking exercise or activity in which it would negatively impact your ability to do so. If you're going out walking, that's taking exercise. You don't need to wear a mask. If you're a professional in the course of your employment. When seated to eat or drink in a hospitality premises. So they're saying that you're allowed to gather in any number that you want. In any establishment that allows you to go in and gather in it. So they don't have to place restrictions on that because it's not the... This is all a contradiction of everything. They can't put it in place. They can't uphold it in a court of law whatsoever. But there we go. Yes, please. Anybody joining from this point onwards, if you have rewound and watched the content from the start, which you can do, this is on DVR, you can skip back to any point in this conversation. How do we know that they can't see the chat? They might be able to see the chat, but they're just not engaging in the chat, and they've left anyway, so there we go. We've had 8 people come in and disappear at various points. Average watch time, 14 minutes. Well, there we go. I shall have to cut this down into even smaller sections. Somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes. It's like, shall I go and edit it now, or shall I bust around on here and have a conversation? Anything else you want to chat about? Why do people come in, stick around for all of 2 seconds, not pay attention to anything that's being said in the video, not chat about it, blah, blah. These things happen. It's just a thing. It's just the nature of people. What I will attempt to do, as of not next week, but the week after, because there's an event next week in which I may be able to acquire more provisions to do so. I'll try and set up a different microphone. There may be guitar related content coming, because I may be able to sort that out, plug it in, fiddle around. Might even be able to do that now if I can be asked to find a cable. Maybe. If I can find a cable, I might do that later. Even though I do need some new strings for whatever guitar I'm using. I mean, there's one that I've barely used and it's got a set of 9s on it, and I don't like 9s, they're too flimsy. It's like more of a set of 11 to 56 that I play in either I drop it a whole step, D standard, or C if I put a 58 on it. Minor differences. If anybody knows about guitars and strings, no. I did see that you had gone on. You were gone on there. I haven't watched it yet. I will go and watch that. So you had a chat about. So don't tell me about it yet. I'll look that up afterwards. Bit of Sunday viewing. But, gonna go and get some munch in a minute. Getting a bit peckish. Have been up for at least 4 hours. It's generally what happens. So you play guitar. Play 10s on a slide. There's a bloke who was about, and he got involved with someone who was a bit more. Do you know who Rob Chapman is? Have you seen him on YouTube? Or anything from Andertons? Because he was involved with them for absolutely ages, but then he moved to Malta. So he's a bit of a pompous dick anyway. He's arrogant and up himself and well middle class. So he gets on my nerves, which is why I don't watch him that often. But anywho, well, there was this busker from Brighton who played one of those lap steel kind of slide guitars, and he got involved with him, and he gave him a guitar and an amp, and he was around for about a month after that, and then he just disappeared completely. And it's like, so this person who busks in Brighton met a person who basically set them up with a professional setup, and then instead of using this professional setup to advance his YouTube careerness, he disappeared off the scene. I don't know what he's doing. He very infrequently uploads. But anyway, Nelly slide guitar on YouTube. If you I'll get it up. I'll link you to his channel. I mean, he's... But yeah, like that. Oh, for pigeon's arsehole's sake, bloody YouTube. Why did it do that? That one, because you can click on links, but I can't. And I mean, even if I... It allows me to click on my own links, but anybody else's... Let me scroll back up. I'm going to click on your link that you put. Oh, it takes me there. It does allow me to click on things. When did they sort that one out? God's sake. Yes. But yeah, he's bloody good at what he does. And he could make a hell of a lot of money on YouTube if he bothered to do anything. And he got set up and he got involved with a slightly bigger YouTuber who could have promoted him a bit more. But then he just dropped off out of nowhere and didn't do anything. So I don't know if something happened to him. Yeah, that might be it. Might be a mod thing. But if we go videos, yeah, it's like he was posting quite regularly 4 years ago. Then all of a sudden he went off out of nowhere, released one video 7 months ago, and then hasn't been about again at any point. And it's like, why did you do that? Why? These dodgy things. Anywho, I covered what I wanted to cover, and I should be editing it and putting it into little videos, or one little video. Yeah. Have a good one.